There we go. We are live. Hey, everybody. Today is March 18th, the day after St. Patrick's Day, and you are hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. As always, you can hang out with us over on Twitter at hashtag CMGR Hangout, where I see a bunch of you are right now. What's up, Patrick? What's up, Laura? Who else did I see in there? Michael's over there. Hey, Michael. Hey, Jen. And hey Jen, so thanks for hanging out with us. If you like what you're seeing today, and maybe you have an idea for another topic we can hang out and talk about, or you want to be on the show, please head over to our website at www.mycmgr.com. Click on participate, fill that form out. It's really your ideas and topics that keep this show on the road. So today we're talking about gamification, and it continues to be a real hot topic in the community space, but we've actually not spent an entire dedicated hour on CMGR Hangout to talk about it. And so, as Sherry was putting this panel together, she said she really strongly believes that at least the understanding and difference between intrinsic and extrinsic rewards and kind of making sure you're not using gamification for evil is all important stuff. And so, we want to make sure that we brought in some experts and learned a little bit here. So with that, I'll let everyone introduce themselves, starting with Thomas.
Just finding the unmute button. So my name is Thomas Canall. I've been building online communities for 19 years now. And a lot of that was with startups and big brands. Kind of a big chunk of that was community architect at Zappos, and launched a couple companies that help on the community side. So I'm just excited to see where this goes.
Awesome. Thanks for hanging out with us. Hey, Pete.
Hey, how's it going?
Fantastic.
So, that's very good. I am actually standing in for the familiar face of Charlotte Kubler here. However, I have exactly the same title as her, and despite looking nothing like her, and she sits next to me at Lithium. And who I am, well, I'm a career-long community professional. I've been managing communities since the mid-90s, and professionally since 2000. A lot of that, conveniently enough, in the games industry, working for companies like Ubisoft, Electronic Arts, and the posters you see up here. I think you can see Tomb Raider on my left. That is not placed there. That is always there. So that's enough of shamelessly waving my gaming credentials. But more recently, so I work at Lithium, and have helped a lot of customers running gamification workshops and kind of teaching them our methodology on gamification, helping them use the features as well as just expand the gamification offering of their community and making sure it helps do all the good things that gamification can.
Hey, thanks, Pete. Hey, everyone. I'm Sherry. I'm the community manager at Magento, which is an open source e-commerce platform, as well as co-producing CMGR Hangout here with Brew.
Awesome. Hey, Jenny.
Hi. This is my first time doing this. I'm not sure if I'm nervous or a little horrified, but I'm happy to be here. I have been doing community and social now probably for about 6 or 7 years, predominantly in gaming and in tech. Right now I'm the director of influencer engagement at a PR company in San Francisco called Trier & Company. And I'm just, like I said, really stoked to be here.
Hey everybody, I'm David Dewald at Carbon Black. Since we're throwing around our gaming cred, I worked at BioWare and Acclaimed Games. And this is a rare panel when we actually have 2 people on the panel that have as much, if not more, time in the community manager industry than I have. So I'm excited to hear from you guys.
Excellent. Hey everybody, I'm Brew, director of Awesome with Be the Change Revolutions, and co-producer here with Sherry. So I'm going to just jump right in. And by the way, I have no gaming credentials other than I love playing Settlers of Catan, and I collect Monopoly, different types of Monopoly. So yeah, no online gaming creds at all, really. Oh, I thought you were going to make fun of me or something, Sherry. That's why you went off
Oh,
mute.
I was just
So let's
going to
just
call
jump.
you out for your previous Candy Crush addiction, but that's a whole different type of gaming.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I thought it was more like a Candy Crush dealer. So we're all on the same page ish. I'd love to hear from you guys what is gamification? What does that mean?
It's Pavlov's dogs. It's absolutely that. So it is about training your users in the behaviors that you want through rewards. In a nutshell, I mean, that's what it really and truly breaks down to. You're training your users to do the things that you want them to do.
Can anyone expand on that a little bit more?
It's really horrible. In my opinion, it's really horrible. It's essentially forcing them to do habits or engage in a product or service that they normally wouldn't be doing. And there's probably a reason for that. One, your product or your service is horrible, and that's why they're not doing it anyways. Or they're just really addicted to another aspect of your service or product, so that the cons outweigh the pros in that regard. I think it's horrible. Horrible, horrible, horrible.
I don't think it's that bad. I think it can be horrible. I think it can be done wrong. But if you're rewarding the behaviors that you want, and they're doing them already, you're just reinforcing the good behaviors, right? If
Yeah.
you're getting the good behaviors you want, and you're saying, hey, thanks for doing that, then they'll continue to do it. And if you don't reward the bad behavior, then they'll hopefully stop. Not likely, but
I think it's a lot more difficult to. It should never be viewed as tricking people into doing something that you want them to do that they don't want to do. It is, just to echo there, definitely around reinforcement and sort of minor rewards, basically. And there is some cynicism around gamification. It's always interesting to follow the Gartner hype cycle for emerging technologies. I can send a link so we can put that in the notes here a little bit later. But gamification is kind of dipping into. It's moved past where it was like in peak hype, and now people are going, hang on, maybe it's not that good. But in my view, I think that means it's the right time now to look at it a little more rationally, see what it is good for and what it isn't good for, and the right ways to use it, basically. And it should certainly never be forced on anyone. It's more a case of offering them a few different gamification elements, and maybe one or two of them will kind of click with some of the people who are already somewhat engaged in your community and drive them to participate a little more strongly, or to start using another feature they might not have thought of using.
And I might be in the wrong place right now. I know that all these are parts of gamification. For me, it's and maybe this is more game design than gamification, but the aspects of this that really interest me from a product perspective and a building community perspective. Absolute favorite piece of it is the different modes of play and being intentional in thinking about ways to enable different types of people with the different psychology to engage within the bigger ecosystem. So just some examples, so the idea of exact same game or exact same community, exact same experience, people can be focused more on things like crafting or collecting or character building, or like these ideas of PvP, like solo competition. And then you have collaborative competition and collaborative completion. And so some of these aspects are where I find more joy is thinking about, so within this community that we're building, and I think Product Hunt is one example. There's the being able to collect things is an aspect of this. There's the ability to interact with a group. There's the aspects of being able to get other people to contribute, and in the conversations that happen. Just as one example of, they haven't focused only on one mode of interacting with the community. They've enabled various ways for people to participate, and I think that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, it's just really interesting kind of hearing everyone's different takes on this, right? And just the different angles and viewpoints. Um, so I'm going to jump us into question number 2 right away, which is how do behavioral economics play a key role in how we build gamified systems?
All right, let's quickly define behavioral economics in case you don't know. Um, it is studies the effects of psychological, social, cognitive, and emotional factors on economic decisions of individuals. So I guess this question is more about using gamification to convert people from being, from lurkers to customers, that kind of thing. So, it's just that if I don't know how this would work, but somehow you offer a discount based on what they're doing, in the community. If they contribute a certain amount, maybe you give them, a free copy of it for a review, or those kinds of things, so that you can kind of manage them and get them hooked. Within the gaming, we have these timers and other things built in that they'll reach a stopping point in order to more quickly advance. Candy Crush Saga. You have to pay, then you have to pull stuff out of your pocket. So there's some incentive to convert you. That's an extreme case using a game to talk about gamification. But within a community, there can be things. I've seen discounts happen with people that are fairly active in the community. They reach a certain point and they're given a discount, which encourages them to buy if they aren't already purchasers, or buy again depending on the product. So yeah, I can see how it could actually play into those behavioral mechanisms.
I mean, when I think of this, I think of some of the platforms like Discourse has done a lot of extra work beyond traditional forums to have different levels at which you can participate more deeply, and so kind of not enabling people to do certain things until they've contributed at a certain level or given more back to the community. So finding ways to help balance out the value that you get to the value that you contribute. Otherwise, it feels much less like a community when there's a huge imbalance on taking and giving. So I like to think about the ways, whatever the platform is, just can we find ways to kind of keep the exchange rates balanced a little bit, so things don't get too inflated on just sucking so much out without being able to contribute.
I think it's important as part of this, and I know we'll be touching a bit on extrinsic and intrinsic motivations and the difference there, but it's important to make sure that when you're gamifying things and rewarding people, that it's always with good intentions, I suppose, and also making sure that you're not changing the relationship. So you did mention giving physical rewards or even sort of rewards of value, and that's always something to be careful of versus these intangible rewards that gamification tends to represent. Whereas if you're even giving part of your community something, there's a risk of introducing jealousy from the sort of less experienced community members, which might turn them away from a path of becoming your top members, or even just changing the relationship with your top members, and suddenly they're not doing it for the love, they're not doing it for these little intangible but still kind of important to them rewards that gamification provides, and instead it's a financial or even just sort of prize-based relationship. So that would be my comment here, always being careful of making sure you're not changing the relationship by especially by being very careful about providing those kind of rewards, tangible versus intangible.
Pete, you had mentioned that we're gonna get into kind of the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. Let's just jump right into that. What is the difference?
I always like to almost oversimplify things. Essentially, intrinsic rewards, it's just something that makes you feel good. You do it because you want to, versus extrinsic rewards, which are One of the examples actually being given a sort of thank you gift, or the virtual rewards that you tend to get with gamification. So and a good community, not just gamification, but a good community in general, should always aim to offer both of those things, those specific rewards for different actions, as well as just providing a place where you feel valued and want to continue contributing because it feels good.
So if I level up, right, is that intrinsic or extrinsic?
Well, if you're sort of being granted something specifically, then that's an extrinsic reward that's being granted to you, and they're of course much easier to give because you can design and plan. Whereas the slightly more intangible, making someone want to participate in the community because they just feel good about it or they like being helpful, that is a little more difficult, certainly. And that's more about the broader how you're managing the community and making it a nice place to be, largely through moderation and the leadership of a community manager doing a good job.
Got it. Anybody else?
I think it can be more difficult to come up with those. In one sense, because it's maybe less easy to identify, like free iPad at 50,000 points, or how are we actually going to make people feel a sense of belonging, a sense of influence over the community, like they can participate, and a sense of appreciation for the contributions that they do make. On the other end, if you do the hard work up front to really understand what is motivating the community and what shared values and purpose do we have together, and accomplishing steps along the way of actually achieving our bigger goals. It takes more thinking up front, but when it's dialed in, then there's not these arguments over what's the budget and how many iPads are we going to throw at this until it counts, and all of those types of things. And so I think it's worth doing the work to understand, how do we help people feel like their contributions are actually appreciated? How do we help them feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves? And there it starts to get muddy between I'm sure we could find technically whether it's an intrinsic or extrinsic reward, but if it's kind of, I don't know, I call them like self-fulfilling prophecies more than what type of reward it is, of belonging and participating is going to continue to fulfill itself. It's naturally going to recruit more people because it feels like something more valuable to be a part of than like, I extracted my whatever from this and there's nothing much going on except a bunch of people trying to gamify or game the system. So if we're too explicitly building gamified systems, then you're just basically asking people to come game the system. And I don't know, I just feel like the whole community suffers whenever it's that clear cut of a set of rules.
Yeah, I agree. And so intrinsic really is the ego, right? That's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to get them to be good for goodness sake. So, doing those things that help them get their 15 minutes of fame is gonna get that intrinsic pull. And throwing an iPad at them after 50,000 posts is very extrinsic. There's a reward at the end of it. So, I think that the problem with some gamification systems, like the old likes, and you could win, like our thing, and you could be in for an iPad, right? That has no value for you at all. All you're getting is people who are going to drive by, hit like, and hope they get an iPad. You get nothing from it. There's no value for you as a company. So it's finding ways to get the value out of those things. Intrinsically, it's easy, right? You thank them for their posts. You say you're doing a great job. You make them VIPs. You treat them special, and they get that ego rush that keeps the intrinsic value there for them to keep going. It's that extrinsic that is tougher because of that monetary thing. It's, are they after the prize, or are they there really to help? And it's finding that balance, and I think it's hard on the extrinsic side that you're going to have people that are going to do it just for the prize, and then once they get it or they don't get it, they're gone, and they're not in your community or they're not contributing anymore.
I think there, it's an important point that it should always be a little bit of a surprise. How you rank up or get a new badge or anything like that, how you get the next achievement should be a surprise, because then it's a pleasant thing that you didn't expect. I've been gaming since I was 5 years old, working in communities for far too long, and on the community for Lithium, our own internal community, I received a badge for 500 posts or something like that, and before I realized it, I went, hang on, that felt good. I should be like cynical and immune to this, but it still had its effect, before my sort of community manager brain sort of switched on. So if it's a surprise, then it kind of touches on both things. It's a specifically designated reward, but you didn't see it coming, so that can sort of have that generate that good feeling as part of that as well. But it should always be mysterious and with or slightly unexpected. And just to your point around contests and prizes as well, whenever I'm sort of designing them or helping another community manager design them, the goal should always be not just to win something, but to generate participants. And I know contests aren't to a degree, they're not strictly gamification, but it's still, in general, they should always be designed to get people contributing to the community and contributing valuable content, and then showing them, hey, if you do this, it feels like a valuable thing to be doing, rather than just running a contest and saying, hey, make a single word post and then you can win something. I'll always try and avoid that and make it a little more interesting and engaging. And that can make all the difference in actually getting new participants for your community, rather than just a few winners who then never stay.
Sherry, I have a question for you on this next question. So the question is about building. Can we continue to build on gamification, or does it have a limited lifespan? Was your intention to be like gamification as a whole, like saying, hey, 5 years from now we're all going to be gamed out and it just won't work on humans anymore? Or were you thinking more about program by program?
No, so a lot of times gamification is used, for example, in like forum-based communities for onboarding, same as in games really, to help guide people through the onboarding process and get them familiar with different parts. Also in moving up ranks or acquiring new badges, so looking more at like ranks and badge types of scenarios. At what point do you max out that system? Like, do you, or do you always keep building on it? That helps put a little more thought process around the question.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I would love, Jenny, I don't know if you have any thoughts about this, especially because you're kind of anti-gamification. It'd be interesting to just kind of think about, especially I think from what Sherry was explaining, specifically about like, hey, I got to get someone through an onboarding process or a training process, and so I do reward them along the way and sort of trick them to get through the whole thing. Do you think that that's a situation where gamification is okay? But then should it just stop after that and not be rolled in? I don't know. I just love to hear your opinion.
Yeah, no, totally. I think for situations like that, for actual forum or community-based activities, it's totally fine. But once you start heavily relying on it, again, in your product or your service, So I was working at a company in Carlsbad, and the one thing that I actually agreed on with the entire team, they were not in the same industry as me. I was the one person that they pulled out from gaming to help them build their product. And the one thing that we actually agreed on is, how can we make this game just so awesome that we're not relying on gamification to acquire users? Instead, it becomes a crutch for issues in the game that right now we just don't have the budget to build. That's something that I was just in awe at, that was their viewpoint on gamification. Too often, when it's outside of a community-based forum or acquiring users, it just becomes a crutch of the product, and it makes me feel like you have to take a step back and figure out, where's the fall off? Why aren't they doing these activities within the service or the product that you're selling them? Is it an issue with your actual users, or is it an issue with your product? And for me, that's where I dislike it. It just becomes this crutch, and it's horrible. It's horrible. In case you don't know, I don't like it, but you know, I think that there's a right and a wrong way to do it, and unfortunately, what we see right now, at least from where I'm standing, it's done as a lazy tie-in.
I would say it should certainly not be a band-aid, as you said. If it's trying to solve a bigger problem that you're just not solving properly, then absolutely that would be using it the wrong way. Rather than ideally being complementary, it should support the growth of the community rather than you relying on it for that. The only other point I'd make around making sure that there's somewhere for it to go in the lifespan of a community. There should always be, I mean, so users, the users who have tens of thousands of posts, it can be quite rare that they'll stop being interested in the ranking system. But then there are more sophisticated elements of gamification you can add, such as group reputation, where instead you're encouraging them, the sort of very most active users and helpful users in your community, to work towards a goal together, or giving them kind of missions or challenges. So one, you can always expand the top end of at a simple level, the ranking structure or the badges when people hit the top level there. But then once your top users get maybe even a little cynical about that and kind of max out, then it's time to start thinking about more sophisticated elements that really challenge them. And like in a video game, the first few levels are very easy. You just have to fight a few zombies or something. But then at level 60, you're fighting monsters like dragons. So it's worth thinking about gamification for your community, the separate elements, and adding those extra tiers on top to make sure there's always somewhere else to go. But then when that top user cynicism sets in, starting even thinking about other elements, because there are so many, and it's important to keep any community fresh with new features, not just new gamification elements.
I think as long as we keep going back to the drawing board every single time with what are we trying to help individuals and the community as a whole achieve, and then say, okay, now that we have a clear goal, what are some of the elements or tools or interactions or dynamics that we can use to help achieve that goal? I think it is always going to have a lifetime. I think that whenever we just stop and go like, okay, how do we just get like another level out of this and just take the exact same set of reuse the same tools and increase the numbers a little bit so that, you know, something else happens, is where it falls apart. And like one example of this was, you know, back at Zappos, we're sitting there, Facebook comes out with the pages, and we need to get likes. How are we going to get likes? What are some things we can do to get likes? I know where we can buy some likes. Well, over here you can buy them for $1.50 instead of $2. Okay, what if we put a JavaScript overlay on the checkout page so that if someone's logged into Facebook, whenever they hit checkout, they're actually going to be hitting a like? And, you know, the question was, how do we get likes? How do we get likes? How do we get likes? And I'm just like sitting with my mouth shut through this whole conversation. It comes back around and like, you haven't said anything. What are you thinking? I'm like, well, I don't really care too much about the things we could do to get likes. I think if we change the question to like, how can we get more people to like us, that we can probably come up with a lot of other things. And then all of a sudden, you know, it was like, well, what if we add like a joke of the line or joke of the day line on the phone call, so people can just call and push a button to get like joke of the line or joke of the day when they call in. And, you know, what if we change from showing branding things on Facebook as the, you know, logo? What if we change it to like people can post pictures like with their kids sitting in a box, or their box strapped to the back of a motorcycle, or, you know, just like send their own picture with a box somehow, and we'll turn them into like the Zappos profile page, you know, for a whole week. You know, just like, how do we get people to like us? Oh, now we're getting creative, and guess what happens? You get more likes. But I think it just always takes that going back to the drawing board, like, what are we trying to achieve? Now, what are some of the, you know, tools that we know of from the gamification world to help us, you know, unlock certain behaviors, but based on a strategy that isn't just how can we get more of this behavior?
Right, exactly. And what I've seen in communities that I've worked with, right, at first when you're in the community, you're getting started, you have those getting started gamification elements to get them to maybe fill out their profile completely, get all this stuff in there. But once they've made it past that, how do you use gamification to encourage the good behaviors? I have seen systems that are point-based, so that you get more points not for answering a question, but maybe for answering a question helpfully or correctly, where other members in the community identify it as being helpful or correct. That, answering it may get you 5 points, but having it be a correct answer will get you 20. So that there's some encouragement to give good answers rather than maybe short, not so detailed. It may be correct, but it may not be enough information, and so that there's value in what they're contributing. And then as they gain those points can be used in a shop, right? So they can take 1,000 points and convert it into some swag, and there's little overhead, and that'll go for a long time, right? So, your customer gets their first 1,000 points, they get that or pencil or koozie or whatever it is, and they think, wow, that's pretty good. And then so they're looking in the shop and they say, look, if I am really good in the community and I get 20,000 points, that's like, a free year subscription to the product, or it could be an iPad or anything like that. So it encourages them for the long run, right? So to get those behaviors where they're contributing good content that other people think are good content, and that can really make it last for a long, long time, and keep everybody in the loop.
How do we address, I'm going to just throw us into question 5 here, is how do we address the risk of encouraging the wrong behavior with gamification? So I think, one of the big messages that I've heard from you guys is that, this is some of the dangers of gamification, right? Is like it could be used for evil too. So, how do we address that risk?
Don't be lazy.
Yeah, and be real careful, right? I mean, anything that any game, if there's a way to cheat, people will find a way to cheat, and they will cheat.
There's definitely a way to cheat, no matter what. Right?
Yeah, it's just, they're gonna find it. I mean, a lot. All of the guys here today are coming from a gaming industry background. We've seen it, right? These are complex systems, and they will find the hole, and they will exploit the hole until you tell them they can't anymore. And they will just do it repeatedly, and they are so creative. They will find a way to game the system, and that's the evil behavior you don't want. You want them in there for the right reasons. You don't want them in there to get their post counts to 1 million by using robots. Those kinds of things. That's why we don't. Just got to be careful.
I think you definitely have to monitor it as well. So you can't just kind of launch it and then ignore it. You need to monitor through the what available analytics you have on your platform, how users are progressing through the gamification system, and notice if anyone is cheating, as well as a few other things. I prefer to avoid things like downvoting and just negative or like giving 1 stars, rewarding that kind of behavior. On the surface, it looks like you're helping filter the best content, but really you can just do that with positive and rewarding positive behavior. And then at the same time, if you can encourage that as much through the gamification that you're providing as much as you do just sort of posting, then you're driving better quality behavior instead of just saying, hey, first person to get to 1,000 posts gets this reward. If you can say, oh, and you have to have done this and this that are also helpful and useful, then you've got a stronger, more effective gamification offering that's driving those more valuable behaviors instead of just encouraging like people to charge ahead and posting any kind of content or participating in a single way.
I just want to jump in and say I'm with you. I absolutely hate downvoting. I think it's completely negative. I think it leads to mob rules, where people with a good idea but maybe not a community approved idea can get just downvoted into oblivion, even though it may be a good conversation, just because the mass majority says that's wrong, even though it may not be.
Yeah, it can encourage ganging up, or like we used to call them flaming bandwagons, where you'd kind of just you'd get people piling on and downvoting things.
They're also an interesting honeypot to leave up. So if you're dealing with a community where bad behavior might be inherent, you can leave up certain honeypots where they don't impact the larger community, but they do show the hand of certain community members, so that you can help improve your filtering of membership based on bad behavior.
That's the longest way I've ever heard someone say ban in my entire life. Filtering of users for bad behavior.
I'm going to have to think about the honeypot idea. It's kind of interesting. I think you'd have to weigh up the benefits and the pitfalls. But it's an interesting point. Something to be careful with, but it's an interesting idea.
All right, so then how do we focus on skill acquisition versus repetition when designing gamification?
Well, I think that if you have a gamification system that can be mission-based, where you can isolate specific behaviors into their own kind of paths of gamification, right? If you want them to, post a question, then you have a mission that is, go to this group, post this question, that kind of thing. Then you can kind of guide behaviors that way. You just, that's part of that early tutorial, how to use the system kind of stuff, where it'll get them, maybe badges or that kind of thing. But certainly having, being able to control what behaviors are happening and being able to watch those behaviors, a good gamification system should allow you to do that. I've seen real complex ones and I've seen real simplistic ones, and almost all of them have something, along the lines of, did they post, did they not post, that kind of thing. Did they update their profile, those kinds of things. So it's just making missions, if you can, within your system that match the behaviors that you want. And the repetition would be is to not repeat the same ones over and over again. Sure, you can have some things that are good for repeated cycles, right? So maybe every time they help somebody, or every time they get a correct answer, something marked as a correct answer every 5 times, then they get some kind of a badge that says, hey, you hit 5 times again. Those kinds of repeated things can be done. It'd be nice if it could be incremental, so that it's like leveling up, right? And you have an XP curve kind of a thing, where the first time it's 5, the next time it's 10, next time it's 20, next time it's 40. But if you can do those kinds of things, that would be great. And just to keep those behaviors in columns or in missions to control them and get them going. Even within communities, people use them in different ways, right? So some people are going to be just much better at explaining things and making helpful, frequently asked questions or guidance for your product or company or game or whatever it is, and having stuff that appeals to what they like to do is going to be real good too.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't really focusing on like skill acquisition over repetitive behavior kind of addressing the risk of encouraging wrong behavior? Because you're wanting people to actually succeed in your community, and you're trying to help them do that rather than trying to induce addicting habits or things of that nature.
Well, I mean, some addicting habits can be good, right? Frequent posters, if they're good quality content, then you want that behavior. If someone posting every day or twice a day or 5 times a day with really good content, heck yeah, I'd like them to be addicted to that. I don't think any community manager would kick them out. So I don't know, but yeah, I guess it does try to address the wrong behaviors, but you're going to have people that do it wrong just because they can.
I think this is where like I like the tool of thanking someone for a contribution, um, and so again, like rewarding the value to the community instead of just the doing the thing, um, so that the better that you get at contributing and participating, the more you can do. And I think there's also, we don't use enough of like holding back certain options or abilities until someone gets to a certain point, where again, ideally you're basing that off of actually adding value instead of just do this 5 times and then you automatically get there. It's like be appreciated 5 times, before you can get to this, next level of capability. And I think I don't know, like for me, I always prefer to think about like how does this work like in meat space, like in the real world, how do people actually work, and then how can we just reflect some of those things in our online tools. I think we've gotten to a point where there's so much that's possible purely in the online world that we stop caring about, would people really do this in real life? Like the greeting someone the second they show up in an online space, like in the real world, you don't go hug everyone who walks through the door and like, oh my God, I'm so glad you're here. Please do this, this, and this. This is the next thing I need you to do. Please stick around for a long time. I think you're so great. Here, let me be helpful. Here's 5 places you can check out next. Anything else I can do for you? Let me just take care of you. If you did that in the real world and someone walked into a bar for your first meetup, they would never come back again. But we do that all the time online. And like, what would it look like to actually sit back a second, let people lurk for a little bit, say thank you after they do something, even if it's the wrong thing, let them click around and, try to stumble into some spots a little bit first, and then like, hey, I noticed you found this one thing. So-and-so knows a lot about this, can we connect you over there? Because in real life, it is about actually learning skills. And I think the biggest way you learn a new skill is by teaching it. And I rarely see a mechanic used that is reinforcing, teaching someone how to do something. I don't know. I'd like to see that more. Maybe I'll just have to do it instead of waiting for someone else to.
All right, so just show of hands, who's implemented gamification into a community? Okay. So I'd love to hear, let's see, we got 15 minutes, we got to get through this. So within a couple of minutes, I'd love to just hear kind of like, and hopefully it was a successful and positive way. If not, let us know. But yeah, I'd just love to hear kind of quick little overview of how that went and your stories. Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in. So
Yeah,
one of my previous companies was called Vontruck, which was a landing page for signing up for like pre-sign-ups or registering for something that doesn't exist or maybe a new version, but basically landing pages for sign-ups. But there was a mechanic on there where all of the, so after you sign up, put in the email address, thank you so much for signing up, share this out and we'll track all the signups that come through this custom URL that goes into all of your tools. And so what was, and I think that this was where I really started to learn that like the thing isn't a thing unless it works well, because we had some customers who abused it and used it horribly and people didn't enjoy the experience, and others who used the exact same base set of tools and mechanics to grow very well. And kind of a throwback to something we were discussing earlier was whenever the incentive for sharing as widely as possible and getting as many signups through your custom URL was very extrinsic, you were basically putting a price on the value of the person, with, even if it wasn't like we'll pay you $200 for every 10 signups. In some ways that would have been better than like we'll give an iPad to you for your first 10 referrals, because then you're giving someone a direct value of what their contribution was, and whatever it was, for the top 10 refers in this group, we're going to bring you to a special dinner like with the founders. Or some of these types of things, people were really excited about it. It definitely worked better than no mechanic, but it was also easy to abuse.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that with us. Who else has a story to tell here?
Yeah, I was going to say, in my current community, we've got ours is mission. We're on the Chive platform. Sorry, Lithium guy. We're on Chive, and there is a gamification. They have like 3 levels now. They have kind of a low level that's just getting started with it. They have this new one that they call a reward system that just came in recently that is for it's a very simplistic mission-based system. You can set up challenges or missions, and they can complete them. Mostly it's for profile stuff or simple actions on the site. And then they have an advanced gamification console, which we are using. And I can actually show that. Let's see, screen 3. I can put it up on screen here. You guys can see that we have some missions. There's onboarding. There's ongoing engagement. We have some special ones that we use for on-site events. We can reward you for coming to our events, and that shows up in the community. And you can see ongoing behavior is liking status updates, rating things, posting documents, marking stuff as helpful, just anything ongoing to help with getting them to do it. And it's been pretty successful so far. One of the things I didn't show you in there is that it does have a built-in shop. So as they collect points, we could put up a shop that allows them to use those points to buy stuff out of a catalog. We haven't gotten that far with it yet. We're still kind of an emerging community, but I can see it down the road. If you want to see a good example of that, based on the Chive platform as well, there's a community called Thwack, Thwack. I'll tweet that out in a minute. It is from a company called SolarWinds, and they have really ramped up the use of that gamification console for using your points to buy products. And you can go in there and start right into their community and just look real quick. It's a good community if you're an IT professional too. But all in all, yeah, it's been really successful for us so far, and nobody has yet to abuse it. I guess when we get the shop up, that's when it might happen, but we'll see.
That's cool.
And then Pete, you said Pete and Sherry, right? You both have implementations you've done.
Yeah, quite a few. I guess I'm going to talk in a little more general terms and just make 2 points about what's worked with a lot of the different customers I've. Partially, I couldn't pick one specifically, and partially, maybe I should be careful of sort of customer confidentiality. But no, seriously, the 2 things are first of all, thinking. We've mentioned onboarding. Gamification is often great for that. As I said, different, more experienced users can maybe get a little more cynical, and you have to work a little harder. But for onboarding, it's about thinking about the behaviors that you want them to display. So the customers I've worked with where they actually thought through that process and even mapped it out, and we worked together on that, what they want, they think the ideal preferred but still realistic customer behavior from the moment they visit the community. So remember, gamification, even if they're not registered and engaged, you can still be showing it to them. Thinking about how they're showing it to those people, how they're gently drawing them in and using it for onboarding without sending them 5 separate notifications for 5 separate gamification rewards. But also, I've seen time and time again what works well is just being considerate of timing. So we were talking earlier about how gamification shouldn't really be used as a band-aid or filling a gap to do something that your product or service should fix instead. So equally, I've seen a few communities before where they had a major crisis and they were like, let's launch a new gamification feature. And customers just, any community member will just see straight through it. Whereas if it's in a bit of a period where the community, particularly if you know how the community tends to work seasonally over a few years, if you pick a quiet period where it's something new that you can give them, it's like you keep some of your powder dry and then offer a new gamification element at a time where they're not volatile or they're not distracted by a new product launch, then it will just be much more successful because it's interesting on its own instead of there being another distraction like a major product launch, or it just being glaringly obvious that you're trying to plaster over a massive crack that's just appeared in the product. So I know I've been speaking a little more generally, but timing is very important, and just thinking about the behaviors that you want the community users to display, basically, and then designing gamification like that instead of being fairly right. You get this badge at 5, 10, and 20. You can be a little more sophisticated and interesting like that. And if you do that, then it's also less predictable and more of a surprise when they receive those. Just to hark back to one of my other points.
How about you, Sherry?
I don't really have specifics to share from ours, to be honest, which is why I didn't really jump in. It was all kind of configured with Lithium's team actually before I joined on, because we were using their platform, which was selected before I was selected. So, but my favorite examples of gamification have been when they are very skill-based and when they help a user on board and they're like, oh, I got this because I set up my profile this way. What else can I do to help be a successful member of the community? Because they obviously do acknowledge these things that I'm doing. So, yeah.
Cool. We're going to roll into our kind of final question and closing statements here. You know, Jenny, I'd love to just kind of start with you. You know, what would be a tip? What would be your number one tip for people watching or listening on you know, if they wanted to get started in gamification? What would you advise them on?
Make sure that it actually adds positively to the experience. Again, I feel like you guys pretty much know my stance, but make sure that it adds and it supplements and it's positive to the user experience, regardless, again, if it's a product or a service. Don't make it a Band-Aid.
Excellent. What about you, David?
Yeah, that's probably it. You know, if you want to get into it, know why you're doing it, and understand the value for your customers and your community. Certainly, you want to get some value out of it, but they've got to get value too. You know, you want them to get value. That's what my argument with everything in the company. If they want to do something in my community, then I ask them, what's the value for my customers? What's the value for my users? So making sure that there's that reciprocity, that they get something for what they're giving you.
Excellent. How about you, Thomas?
Yeah, just know what you're actually trying to help actual people do, not computer username things that are in your stats system, but like, what do you want people to do? How do you want to help them? And then go find whatever that mechanic is that's going to help, but start there, not with a pile of gamification Legos and like, how much can we exploit?
And Pete?
I would just drive home the timing point again, so making sure that you're not launching it at a time when customers are going to see straight through it being sort of plastering over some other product issue, as well as not launching all of it at once as well. I'll say, I use this phrase a lot, just keep some of your powder dry, always have something new to send them, to add to the community, instead of overwhelming and launching sort of 5 or 6 different community features, some of which might be gamification. Don't launch them all at once. Just consider the best time, and even picking what's suitable. So, for example, if I mentioned for some of the more sophisticated users thinking about launching missions or something around group reputation, you wouldn't want to do that 2 months into the launch of a community. So With just a little bit of thought, I think a lot of that is fairly common sense, but just question, step back and say, is this the right time to launch this? Or do I need to launch this right now, given that I've just launched that other gamification feature? So staggering them and picking the right time.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for your time today and your insights. Yeah, wow, the hour blew by pretty quickly this Friday. So, Sherry, do we have a topic for next week? A little preview?
We do. We're talking about kind of what happens when companies need to let go of the community team member and how we as community professionals can help support other community professionals who are kind of let go, which stems from, I don't know if anyone's familiar with O'Reilly letting go 2 of their community team members at their user conference recently. So that topic came up on CMX and someone asked if we'd be willing to do a hangout around it. So that's what we're doing.
Sounds cool. Well, not cool, but it sounds interesting. Maybe is a better way. So, all right, great guys. Well, have a fantastic weekend, a great week, and we'll see you next Friday. Bye.